In this training, we're going to show how automations work really nicely with the checklist field. So we're going to be diving into different automations that you might build with that checklist field in one of your apps. So if that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. There's a lot to cover for checklists in automations. So let's go ahead and hop on into my screen and get going. Now, we have a pretty simple setup here where I have a projects app. And inside of my projects, I want to be able to check this box. And when I do, I want that to create a checklist of items for me. And the items are just going to be 3 different tasks. Now, I could choose to assign these tasks to someone. I could also choose to enter a due date. And this is all possible inside the automation, which we're going to take a look at. Now, that's only part 1. The other part here is that when all these tasks are completed, I want to then send an email to myself saying all tasks for this particular project are now done. So let's talk about how we can build these 2 different automations directly inside of SmartSuite using that advanced checklist field. So first and foremost, we're going to say when that box gets checked. We have to identify the trigger for any automation. So let's go ahead and pop up here and drop into the automation itself. Here we can add a new automation and we can simply say when a record matches conditions. So for our automation, we've decided that when the box gets checked, that's what makes it happen. So we have a specific condition in mind. Note that we have a number of different types of triggers that we could fire this automation from. We could have it scheduled at a particular time, say that when the record is initially created, it has certain things happen, when a record is updated or when a form is submitted. More of these triggers will be coming every day inside of SmartSuite. But let's go ahead with the record matches conditions for now. We have to pick the right application. So for us, it's the project app. And here's where I get to determine what I'm looking for. What are the conditions that I'm waiting for? Well, for us, we have a create tasks button. It's a yes/no field. So we choose the field first, and then we go into the logical operators. What kind of logic are we looking for here? Well, we want it to be equal to what? Well, yes. Equal to yes. Those are the 2 options, either yes or no. And for us, we want it to be checked, and that's what's going to set us off to the races. So here is my condition inside of my trigger. That is the first step of our SmartSuite automation. Now we're going to move into creating the tasks. So I can add an action, and what I want to do is update the project record that initiated the automation. So I can say update records. Now from here, it's going to ask me again, what exactly do you want to update? And I say, well, the record that started this thing. Note that I have the option to also find other records that I might want to update. But for me, I want to update the record that initiated the automation. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. Now, what do I want to update within that record? Well, that's my checklist field. So find that checklist field, whatever you've named it. And here's where I get to add the first item to that checklist. So the first item, I want to call it task 1. I can also bring in a due date, so I can find some different dates. Maybe I have a specific date. Maybe there was a date related from the trigger, or some date actions, like I want to make this due a week from whenever the automation runs. Cool. Now the next part is bringing in an assignee. So who am I going to make in charge of this thing? Well, I'll pick on myself. So I'll just find a specific member and assign myself there from the list. So this is now my first item inside the checklist. All of this done inside of this new step, but I'm not done yet. I want to create some more checklist items. Rather than bringing in a new field, because it's the checklist field, there's only one checklist field, I simply add additional items here inside of this. So don't overlook that little nuanced detail. So here I want to bring in task number 2. And this one might be set at a different time. So I would say date actions, maybe this one's a month from now. And I can bring in an assignee, and I might assign this to someone different, or again to myself. And you get the idea. We can add additional tasks in our automation, all one at a time here inside of this. But now every time the automation runs, it's going to do all of these different steps throughout the automation. So I'm pretty happy with this. I've added my 3 different tasks here inside of my checklist, and I can go ahead and now add the automation. Of course, don't forget to turn the automation on and rename it as well to help you stay more organized. Here it's called New Automation 2, so that doesn't really help me. I might come in and add a description or rename the automation up here by clicking on Rename. And I could say something like Checklist. So once I'm happy with that, again, don't forget to name your automations. It's going to help you stay way more organized. But go ahead and click out and, of course, test your automation. I want to see that when I check the box, as I just did, we're going to give SmartSuite just a minute to think, and we should expect to see some checklist items getting created here pretty quickly. So there we go. Those items were just created inside of our SmartSuite record, and I can click in and ensure that they were in fact created correctly. So there we go. A week from today, a month from today, and a year from today, all assigned to me with the proper names. Now, the next part that we want to do is build an automation based on the completion of this checklist. So how do we do that? Similar process here. We pop back into our automations. This will be a separate automation because it's going to trigger off of different conditions. So of course we say add an automation. And in this particular case, we're looking for record matching a condition again. This is one of my favorite ones, one of my favorite triggers. I use this all the time. But what we're looking for in the projects app is specifically to look for that checklist. And once we bring in our checklist field, you'll see that our logical operators are slightly changed. So here's what we can work off of with this. We can say we want to trigger an automation when all checklist items have been checked off, all items resolved. Or maybe not all items resolved. Or maybe % complete is greater than a certain percentage. So I could say at 50% or whatever that case may be. Or I could say % complete is less than. So we have a lot of flexibility with triggering an automation that's watching that checklist field and won't be initiated until the checklist field is representative of something that we're looking for. So in our case, we say, look, we only want this thing to work when all items are checked off in a particular record, and maybe then we want to send that email. So here I've got my condition, my trigger properly built. I can move into an action, and I can then use email directly from SmartSuite and send an email to myself or to my manager, wherever I want to get this email sent. But I can go ahead and send it out. I can say items complete. And I can even include information from the trigger in my message or any other part of this automation. So I can say all checklist items complete for, and here's where I can start bringing in information from that trigger. So I can say, well, I want to know whatever the name of this particular project was. So there it is. That's the title of the project. So you see how I can use both static data, that is, typing the same thing over and over, and combine that with some dynamic information as well, which will change every time the automation runs. This makes automations incredibly powerful. So scrolling down, we see we have a couple of other options as well. I can add attachments, include field comparisons. I'm not going to worry about any of the extra stuff. I just want to get this automation going, so I save it, make sure to turn it on. Of course, also rename your automation, as we said earlier. And then from now on, once we get all of our checklist items completed, marked off here, well, now once we save this, this is now at 100%. That will initiate the automation, and I'll soon be receiving an email from SmartSuite. I know we covered a lot here, so please take your time to go back and rewatch anything that you might have missed the first time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next training. If you have any questions about what we covered in this training, please ask them below in the comments section of this video. And until then, we'll see you in the next training.